this time our Winchesters go to help a single mother whose son witnessed a family member being dragged downward by something mysterious. Okay, I'm joking at this point. The actual recap is that Mary's neighbor is out driving her truck when the monster of the week appears to menace her kids. The experienced hunter Mary runs after the kids without a plan, but luckily her main character shields and the kids' adorableness shields are all strong enough to keep them alive until the rest of the cast can figure out how to solve things. Meanwhile, Carlos and Ada go out on a stakeout for the season arc and actually stumble into it, giving us a quick glimpse of the arc's face. Oh, and the writers seem a bit confused about love triangles. This is what I'm talking about with how the second episode should have been. This was a much better outing. So, let's get the negatives out of the way first. Does anyone remember that Mary had a mom, Deanna Campbell? The grandparent Dean, the guy narrating the show, was named after? I understand why the whole thing is focused more on fathers. I understand she would not appear that much in this show, but in this episode, when the monster of the week involves their next door neighbors, when Mary has to babysit said neighbors' kids, I thought surely Deanna was going to show up in this episode. Maybe she would at least get a mention? No, she doesn't even get a line. For all a new viewer would understand, Mary Campbell is being raised by a single dad. I know I said before that I would try and let the canon slide if they at least made the show decent, but this is a big-ass elephant to ignore or remove because, again, this is a character that one of the main ones from the mothership was named after. It is bugging me that our monsters are getting well lit at the end of these episodes. This monster looked great at the beginning, but once it's bathed in lights, it isn't the same. I know we're on a TV budget. You can't make everything look amazing. But a bit of adjusted lighting would go a long way towards spookiness. The Accreta bugs aren't done any favors by being well lit either. They just remind me of a mashup between the collectors from Mass Effect and the bugs from Starship Troopers. I was also a little bit annoyed that the monster's lair was so obviously a decorated storage unit. It's not a huge deal. I just wish they had done a bit more to make it seem otherworldly. Now, while I do appreciate the use of the CB radio this episode, some of us were just talking about such things in my previous review, in fact, it does bug me that they just happened to have a radio in the monster lair. I always enjoyed Supernatural most when it and the characters were being smart to overcome the long odds, especially considering that the show established that there were 2 radios, one in each house. It even sets up John and Mary talking on them. That they then don't go the extra step of just having Mary take the CB radio she is using into the monster den with her is frustrating. Yes, there is the question of how it would be powered, but then how did the CB radio that was already down there have power? The answer to that question is the answer to your other one. So now we come to the love triangles. Okay, so I don't mind love triangles as a theory. Even when you know a couple is destined to be together, a love rival can really bring out interesting things about a character and the relationship as well. I mean, even when we know the hero of a story is going to win, we find entertainment in him or her overcoming the challenges to victory. Love triangles are like that for relationships. Challenges to overcome and make the romance engaging. I was digging Betty at first, thought it was interesting that John seemed to have a type, and maybe this would give us new insight into his character, and oh, they had an engagement ring, and that's all just been torpedoed. Again, it feels like the writers are skipping to the last page of the book when we, the audience, need to see the story. A lifelong friend crush who John was planning to wed a few years ago, and now that's all done because of one cute blonde girl he bumped into his first day back home. That just all comes off as way too quick. They didn't need to drag this out, but we could have had 1 or 2 episodes of John and Betty reconnecting and discovering how far they've been pulled apart now, while at the same time showing John and Mary growing closer. Because it's really jarring to watch John blow up one love triangle while Mary runs off to the movies and sets up a whole new love triangle with John's stunt double here. I guess we see Mary has a type too. Anyway, this might have all been more interesting if John and Betty were still a going concern, so then we, the audience, could watch these two forces pulling to separate our main couple. Otherwise, as it is, it feels like the show ended a more interesting love triangle for a much shallower, more boring one. Although I am betting right now that this dude is just going to be this show's version of Meg. You know, assuming we ever see him again. And finally, what is up with this room? The sun is blaring outside in the middle of the afternoon and they still need to use flashlights to look around through it. Alright, so what about all the ways this episode was great? Well, Mary and Lotta here are both making very strong arguments for 70s fashion this episode. I hope some of the girls out there got a little eye candy from the boys on screen, but I can't comment on that. I have been a Bridget Regan fan ever since I saw her in Legend of the Seeker, so it was nice to see her return in some leather and red hair. I do love that this show is doing whole new monsters and isn't just retreading the same group of monsters the Mothership show started to do at the end of its run. This first half of this episode was also great in making the monsters spooky and giving it the right feel of being supernatural. This little effect right here with the flame in the hat, I love that. I prefer it when special effects go toward more subtle efforts to show a world that is wrong or off than something big and flashy. The child actors were actually pretty good. Well, the boy was acceptable, but the girl here, man, she knocked it out of the park and almost stole every scene she was in. I nearly laughed out loud as she ripped apart her bunny with her bare hands and then stomped on the monster at the end of it. Rock on, girl. And Lotta finally got a bit more to her character with the reveal that she's estranged from her parents for a reason we don't know. Now, I understand that she can't be quite as flamboyant and outgoing as the other characters. There is an old comedy saying that blue doesn't show up on blue, so you do want contrast in an ensemble. But we do need some personality nonetheless, so it was nice to have some more from her, but the writers really need to give us more of her personality and character. Now, fair warning, I'm going to gush over my favorite scene in this whole episode. See this? This is perfect. This is what I'm always on about, how much you can accomplish with very little in the visual medium. I timed it. This entire bit that I'm talking about takes up 10 seconds before a single word is uttered. In those seconds, we are shown something about Carlos's and Ada's personalities. We get a sense about their likes, their hobbies, even their facial expressions, showing us their mood and reaction to it all tells us something about them. Then on top of all that, this scene is also giving us a preview and glimpse of the season's arc villain, but the audience doesn't even realize it until the end of the episode. Again, all done entirely in 10 seconds. 10! Then, from that solid foundation, Carlos breaks the ice in the scene and everything builds from there. We get exposition about the world, more about the characters, and then a villain appears, we get an action scene. Perfect. All of this sequence was perfect. This is why I rant, because I know how good the show can be when it pulls this kind of thing off. And it requires so very little. Just 10 seconds. Also, the revelation that the villainess is running a pirate broadcasting station, yeah, very appropriate. This is more the kind of subtlety I was wanting back in Season 7 with Dick Roman. So, what's the rating for this episode? We still don't quite have the scale properly calibrated. This episode is at least the equal of the first, but it could be argued to be even better and setting the standard for a 5-shell episode. But I'm pretty sure the show can keep improving, so I'm going to rate this as 4 shells out of 5. But I'm in a much more positive mood now and have a lot more optimism that we might see something really, really great from this series. Join me next week to see if we do.